Initiating broadcast signal in
10, 9, 8, 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1.
Ladies, gentlemen, and knights of the Nerd World Order, this is the Nerd World Order broadcast. I am the man that you call Dukes, and to my right, it's all about the...
Booyah, what's up? It's your boy Joe, baby.
And to my other right, weighing in 178 adamantium field pounds, coming straight out of the danger room, Alfonso X-Man Flores.
I wish this movie didn't remind me of so many of my ex-girlfriends.
And to my other right, coming straight out of Arizona on vacation, we have Elijah Saurus Rex and the GOAT himself, Jordan. What's up, gentlemen?
Hey, how you doing? How's it going?
It's actually going really well. So, if you couldn't tell by Alfonso's pun of the episode, we are going to be discussing the phenomenon that is Obsession, the movie that came out of nowhere and has just performed so well at the box office. Now, if we're talking X-Men, we're going to bring in Finch. We're going to have Alfonso. If we're talking Star Wars, we're going to bring in Danny Salazar. If we're talking Obsession, we're going to have to talk to Elijah and Jordan because Elijah has seen the movie like, I don't know, 10, 15 times. I might be exaggerating, but it felt like 10, 15 times when I had to watch it again this weekend. So, we're going to be discussing that, and these gentlemen, I will say, are the experts. So in case you're wondering, like, well, who are these guys? We got my nephew, Jordan, and we got my son, Elijah. So they are going to be the experts. Thank you guys very much for taking a break from your vacation. I wish I could be with you guys, but thank you for taking a break from your vacation to come on the episode.
Thank you for having us.
Absolutely. So I want everyone to know a little bit about you guys, a little bit about your nerd cred. So Jordan, I'll let you open it up. Tell us a little bit about yourself and your social media presence.
Okay, so I'm Jordan. I like things, nerdy. So, I like to collect action figures. I collect comic books. I like fashion, and I love photography and music as well. On social media, you can find me at Not For Everyone. So it's NOT, the number 4, and then EVR, and then the number 1. On Instagram.
Nice. Awesome. Elijah, what do we need to know about you?
Hey, I'm Elijah. I'm also really into, nerdy stuff. I collect comic books and I collect figures too. I'm into fashion, maybe not as much as Jordan is, but I work on my own clothing brand. I make music. Jordan and I are actually starting our own band here soon. We don't have an account for it yet, but I post figures, I post poses on my story, and you can find me at loveonly.eli on Instagram.
Nice. Awesome. Good stuff, guys. By the way, everyone, just so you know, Elijah opens his figures, and it drives me insane, dude. Like, dude, oh my God. But yeah, there you go. So we're going to be talking Obsession. So let me start off by telling you guys my anticipation going into this movie. I would have skipped it completely. Had Elijah not insisted and actually, like, he dragged my wife and I to watch this. He was like, no, you have to see this movie. This is the best movie you're ever going to see. And I watched it, and was it the best movie of the summer? But it was good. I mean, I have no complaints. It was a good movie. I wouldn't have watched it otherwise, but, based on Elijah's level of excitement, I actually saw it, and, no disappointment that I saw it. What about you, Alfonso?
Well, I really had no level of anticipation for this movie because, I knew about it. I heard about it. I knew that, a couple of guys from YouTube put it together. It looked interesting and intriguing. It's just not my genre. So I wasn't super, ready to hunt it down. I figured, I'd catch it when it's streaming, and, it's streaming. So I got it. But yeah, definitely. I wish I would have heard about it sooner, but it's scary. It's scary because it's far too relatable.
Joe, you wikied this, right?
No, I actually watched it.
What? Okay.
Yeah, it
okay.
was free. It's free on Peacock. So I
Nice.
mean, why don't you watch it for free? Yeah, I didn't have no interest to watch it really. I mean, if I want to watch Obsession, I just go on TikTok or Instagram because that's what social media is nowadays. Is Obsession.
And let's see here, Jordan. What was your level of anticipation going into this?
So my level of anticipation, it was I actually had really high hopes for this movie. I still, I love the movie, but the trailers is what really did it for me. The way that the trailers, came out, they were so out of like nowhere. Like, because when I saw the first trailer for Obsession, I was like, okay, this movie looks cool. And then I did a little bit more research, and then I had seen that Curry Barker, which is a creator I had followed before the movie came out, that he made it, and that really drew me in. And then after Elijah had seen it for the first time, he was telling me that it was a really good movie. So it took his third watch to be my first watch. So it was his third time watching the movie when we both watched it. So it was really good. It was a really good movie.
Awesome. And Elijah, level of anticipation.
So, my level of anticipation was kind of mid-level because the movie actually swept under my radar, which is weird because I grew up watching Curry Barker's skits and stuff, and I'd only heard about it after I saw Backrooms, and I went on social media and people said to not see Backrooms and see Obsession instead. So I was like, okay, I'll go see Obsession. And then the only reason why I had like a medium level of anticipation is because most movies that I see are good and people say are good on social media, I genuinely think they're just okay or I don't like them. But I have been told that I'm very picky with my movies, and but I ended up liking it, and it's genuinely probably, depending on how good Spider-Man and Doomsday are, it's my favorite movie of this year so far.
Nice. So, can you explain to us, those who are uninformed, who is Corey Barker?
Curry Barker.
Curry Barker. Steph Curry.
He's actually a YouTuber who started his channel back in like 2015 or 2016. He dropped out of college to make comedy skits. So they kind of started off kind of like Key and Peele did. And that's where they started. And then maybe towards like 2019, 2020, and like during the 20s, they started to experiment with short horror films and skits. And they made their first first horror film and posted it on YouTube. And then they started making Obsession in late 2024 and early 2025. And then he tried to push it to get mass produced into theaters, which then got taken in by Focus Features and Blumhouse and released this year. So they actually finished the movie in 2025 in 20 days, and it was released this year. So that's who Curry
Nice.
Barker is.
Now,
By chance, did you watch the episode that whole Obsession movie is based on The Simpsons?
I have seen it. I watched it after I saw Obsession to get a better understanding. I can see why you wanted to use that as inspiration because Obsession uses very good elements of horror, but it also tries to make some elements that are supposed to be scary but can be seen as funny, which I feel like was a good mix, kind of like how The Simpsons is mostly comedic, but in that they tried to be horror, But I think it was a very good inspiration of making it more or less of it's a cursed object and more of just it's a bad wish.
Yeah, if I can add on to that. I think the very the very base of the movie is a very common trope in cartoons, like in the Fairly Odd Parents, when Timmy Turner had asked for the love potion. It's basically that, the trope of, we see, people making love potions and people casting spells to alter reality.
so one thing about this movie is, it's not very original in the sense, like you guys are saying, like Treehouse of Horror. It's been done before. It's a very common trope. And I'm going to open this up to everybody. Obviously, Elijah, Jordan, you guys are the experts. But why do you think this movie has developed such a cult following so quickly?
I can honestly say that Obsession definitely did a great job reaching towards the younger audience. I mean, the music selection that they chose. Let's take the scene where Samantha and Bear were in the car. Or Sarah. Is it Samantha or Sarah? Sarah. Sorry. Guess I'm not the expert. Sarah and Bear are sitting in the car as they're going through they're reading her college application. And a song that I've listened to before the movie, it was Kids by Current Joys. You know, it's a really good song, and that song, you know, blew up on Instagram and TikTok. So to hear that song was really cool. But I just think the cinematography was really good. I think the way it was directed, and I think, you know, Indy Neverede is an amazing, you know, horror villain.
So, who was that? Like, was that Nikki or was that Bear?
That's Nikki. Indy is Nikki.
Okay.
yeah.
You guys, you know, you're dropping names, and
Oh yeah.
you got to realize you guys are way ahead of us on this stuff. So yeah. So it's interesting. Go ahead, Alfonso.
I was just gonna say, what's really interesting to me is like you've got these comedic writers, actors like Jordan Peele, like you said, and Curry Barker, and like they're redefining the horror genre. I mean, they're doing something different. You know, like when Jordan Peele started making his horror movies, it's like it was just so different. It was so off-putting. Everybody was loving them, and same with this show. This movie, it was just like you can't quite place it. You know, it doesn't really have jump scares. It has some weird movements. It has some weird lighting choices. It has some weird facial expressions, and it's so off-putting because it feels a little more real. You know what I mean? And it's just like, and I'm blown away too. Like they bring this new thing in, like what is it? The wish thing, One Wish Willow. One Wish Willow. They bring in the One Wish Willow like it's been around forever. You know, like Bloody Mary. You know, everybody's so familiar with it, and it's like, you know, they put it in, they drop it, and they just go with it. I don't think it's something that's been around forever, but you know, it's the way it just felt so familiar, like we've been hearing about it our whole lives. Like, you don't go in there and say Bloody Mary in the dark 3 times in the mirror, you know, because it's going to happen. So it was really well done, and it, you know, not my favorite, but you know, it's not my type of movie, but I really enjoyed it, you know, and it was nuts. It was really nuts.
Yeah, I can definitely say that, you know, when comedic directors start doing horror movies, it adds a level, you know, like you said, a level of realism, because a comedy is such a grounding, you know, genre of movies. You know, when you're watching a comedy, you know, you feel like you're with them. So to have that element inside of a horror movie is, you know, it's definitely great.
Yeah, and they have a different outlook on it too, because like me, you know, a lot of people say I'm funny, but the main thing is like if I don't know how to deal with emotion, I'm laughing, man, and people look at me like, "The hell's wrong with you, dude?" And I'm like, you know,
Right.
And it comes off a little psychotic, and
Right.
I appreciate that in me.
So, you know, one of the things that you guys said, for me, it was like, we could spend an hour debating this. Okay. So I'm going to break it down a different way. The only villains that weren't in this movie, potentially not the villain bad guy, was the cat, because it got out as soon as it could from this movie, and Sarah.
Mhm.
Everybody else, in one way or another, Nikki, that's not her fault. But
Right.
man, when you talk about Bear and his homie, them dudes were trash.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Who do you think the villains were? And I'm opening it up to everybody. Who were the real villains in this movie?
Definitely Bear.
Yeah, I definitely think it's Bear, for sure, because you know, taking someone's autonomy is just completely immoral, because you're basically stripping them of their humanity. You know, I will say that Ian, Bear's friend, could have been a little bit more open and communicated a little bit better. So he has like maybe like a quarter of the blame, but most of it is Bear, because his obsession with Nikki. Because obsession really they try to portray it like it's Nikki, but Bear did have an obsession with Nikki too, because there's scenes where he's stalking her Instagram and just saying things like, you know, crying because she isn't openly saying that, you know, she loves him or whatever the case may be. Mainly the villain is Bear, just because he had numerous opportunities to cancel his wish, take responsibility, have the courage to make the right decision, and he didn't because he was too much of a coward. So that's just what I believe.
Yeah, I was thinking it's like he had that opportunity to, like, he's trying to take it back, but he's like, can I adjust it? Jerk. I'm sorry, go ahead, Joe.
Oh no, go. We did that.
That's all I had to say about that. Just like, I'm gonna try to take it. No, let's just adjust it, because I'm still gonna be this crappy person who's making her love me and taking away her free will.
That's a good point. That's a good point. Instead of wanting to fix her, he was like, "But I still want it. Let's just make it a little bit better." That's trash. Go ahead, Joe.
One can make an argument that it's all three. And let me explain. Ian's a bad friend, dude.
Trash.
Ian, if he would have just said, "Look, me and her on and off again," they're supposed to be best friends.
Word.
I would never do that to Alan or Alf. I would never do that. I would never
Facts. Trash.
bang a chick that I'm my best friends have a close relationship and they want to get. I would never do that. Ian
Facts.
starts it all. If Ian just was up front and said, "Look, I'm kind of like banging her, bro. Like, so you kind of, I don't think there's anything there." There's no story. But again, you have to make a movie, right?
Yeah.
The second is Bear. He's a simp. Now, let me break up to your point. Stalking someone's Instagram, that's everybody does that. And if you say that you're not doing that, that's straight cap. Just like you got on your head right now, Elijah. Everybody looks at a chick and searches Instagram. That's just the way it is. So Bear is not guilty for doing that because every dude does that on himself. And women do it as well, dude. If they like a guy, let me go see who he's looking and what he's liking and stuff like that. That's just the way it is. And I think that's why this movie does very well to the younger audience, because that's all you guys do. Third, Nikki too. And let me explain. Because Nikki, even though she was on and off again with that dude, her and Bear had a relationship for like 10 years or something like that. She kind of had, if you look, she kind of has feelings for him. And he just didn't make a move. You know why? Because the dude's a simp. Right? And she gave him a chance. Do you like me? And if you look at her, if he would have said yes, I'm telling you, dude, you could make an argument that they could have did something and none of this would have happened. So I think all three of them are just as guilty. I think Sarah's the only innocent one, and she got damaged the most with the brick. And I guess Curry does that in a lot of his shorts. He has bricks in his videos, and so the brick had to make an appearance on the steering wheel. The special effects kind of looked kind of off when he was doing the banging on it. It kind of looked weird. You know what I mean? Like it didn't look that well. But I get it's just 4 people, dude, and then like a few people in the background, dude, and it's just like $750,000 to make that, bro. Like I guess to make her move real quick in certain situations, but they made $443 million. So I mean that's pretty good in itself. It's intrigued me a little bit more. Like afterwards, and I watched it. I'm glad I did watch it because I thought it's kind of cool to see an aspect of taking a poltergeist in a way of like when he also did the phone call, and it sounded like she was in purgatory wherever she was at. I'm like, my man, you stole my boy. Get Out, bro. That's you took Get Out and made it into a wishing thing. That's all you did. You took my boy, you P. Diddy it, and then you try to make a little snap because all that was Get Out. Someone trapped in another body, right? For me. So it's like when I'm watching it, but to your point, Alan, you said it is a trope of it being just like everything else, and it's just a different version of Get Out.
Interesting. So, you talk about that as far as it, it being a different version of Get Out, and I feel like, your phone listens to your conversations, and then that's what your feed becomes, right? So since I live with Elijah, I have conversations about obsession every day. So that's all I have on my TikTok now. So I've heard so many theories, right? I've heard, and Elijah explained it to me, and I'm like, well, that makes sense, that she was obsessed by the cat. Or I'm sorry, she was possessed by the cat, right? So that's one theory, right? And then there's another theory where she's actually not fully possessed by any sort of entity, but she is overwhelmed by Bear's will, right? And then there's just all these different theories. And so I guess, my question for you guys, because here's what I really like about this movie. Any movie where I walk away and I have questions and I'm not 100% like, this is what it is, and that's all it is, and I can't analyze it and have a conversation, I'm like, it was good, but I'm done. This movie, a lot of questions, a lot of things, even, like, dude, Bear was so much trash. Like at the end when he had a chance to save Nikki and he's like, nah, I can't do it. I'm not. Dude, so much trash. But anyway, what do you guys think was going on with Nikki?
I think one thing that Curry Barker did really good was leaving it ambiguous. A lot of elements in the movie were ambiguous, whether it was, did Nikki really have feelings for Bear? Was Nikki possessed by an entity? Is the One Wish Willow cursed? Personally, I think that what the One Wish Willow did was it made basically a split personality out of Nikki. So like I believe that, basically like what he said is it basically was overpowering her with Bear's will, but I also think it amplified her emotions to a degree where it's not human level or you don't see it in regular day life. So I think that's what it was. Where kind of like in an episode of SpongeBob where he has like two faces. And one side is the green side, where it's the mean side, and one side is actual SpongeBob. I believe it's very similar. Where it was one side you see real Nikki pop out here and there, but most of it was Nikki's emotions amplified to the max on a non-human level or a non-healthy level. So that's what I believe it was.
What about you, Jordan?
I can agree on that, but I do think that the cat plays a bigger role than people think. I mean, just her mannerisms and the way she was acting. Elijah had pointed this out when we first watched it, and I didn't get a full glance at it. In the scene where she's in front of his apartment door, and the camera's underexposed, and all we can see is a silhouette of her face, and her eyes is actually really common in cats. And if we take the way she was acting their first night sleeping together, she's hiding and tucked away in the corner. And she's very skittish. Just the way she was walking, those creepy, backwards reverse shot walks she would do is very animal, very pet like. And also the way she would wait for him while he was at work. She would sit there and she would soil herself, and she would sit there, she would starve herself, and just to wait for Bear to come back home. And I think the reason why the cat plays a big part is because Sandy is the only person that has loved Bear back the way that as much as he's loved them, as much as he's loved Sandy. So, cats, and dogs and, pets in general, they have an unconditional love for their owners. They'll do whatever it takes to show their owners that they love them, which I think, Nikki is doing everything in her power, whether it's human or non-human power, to show how much she really loves Bear.
I'm going to have to agree with Jordan. Right now, 5 minutes later, my opinion could be different. But, once Elijah pointed out, like the eyes, that's what got it for me. Because at first, I was thinking like some form of like, otherworldly possession, but then once Elijah's like, well, that's like a cat. And I was like, oh, yeah. And then, like and I was telling Alfonso this during our downtime, your pets, or I guess cats specifically, will bring you like dead animals, dead birds, stuff like that. And, she found a dead animal and then gave it to him, So it's like, yeah, there's so many things that indicate, and I don't know how that works. Like, it's beyond my comprehension, but that's such is the nature of fantasy and sci-fi. It's like I don't have to understand it, but it works. So I think Nikki was actually in some way taken over by the spirit of the cat.
Yeah, it's funny. I never even thought of that at all when I was watching this movie. I thought like she was being held somewhere, and that there was like some kind of entity in charge of her. But the cat thing does make a little bit of sense. I was kind of on the fence because as you guys were talking about, I'm like, well, she fed him the cat. It's
Right.
So, but then again, it's an animal, and it's not. It doesn't think that way. It doesn't think the way a human does. So I could see that, and all the movements they were kind of cat-like when hiding in the corner and the laughing and the just oh man, like just watching him sleep, and it was like But yeah, I never really thought of it that way. It does make some sense, but the cat did die well before he made the wish, so
Right.
it was like in a holding pattern, waiting for the wish to happen, so come over and possess her. It's interesting because I'm curious of what their thought process on that is, or if they're just trying to be super ambiguous, so that people had to come up with their own theories, so they could see. Let's mess with them. Let's see what they come up with, and then they'll be like, oh yeah, I like that one.
Yeah, I think with me, I'm kind of 50-50. It could be Sandy possessing her, or it could be what I said, the amplified emotions. If it were Sandy possessed Nikki, I think it makes sense because in science, when someone dies or an animal or any living organism dies, its body decomposes, but its energy never stays there. That doesn't mean like a ghost or a spirit. Scientifically, energy doesn't ever leave, it's always there. So that could be one way that, because Sandy died in that home, his energy stayed there, which could then mean because Nikki went to, was around Sandy, or Bear was around Sandy, it transpired into her body and was the reason why she got possessed by Sandy. It could be, that's one thing that I like about this movie is how ambiguous it is, because it leaves it up to the audience to come up with their own theories, and whatever is, they relate to it too. That's one thing I like about horror is it's subjective, and it could be applied in any way that they want it to be applied to. Whether someone agrees with it or not, that's how you interpreted it, and that's personal to you.
Yeah, and to play on the cat thing, the reason why I say, it's not a direct like, oh, Nikki is possessed by the cat. I think the One Wish Willow was a two-way wish, right? It had changed both Nikki and Bear, because if you noticed, Bear wasn't acting normal, right? If your girlfriend comes out, first night after sleeping with her, your dead cat, she dug out the trash and made a shrine. He was like, oh, you can't do that. Or the time that she had made him eat, rotten cat meat. Any sane person would have, either called the cops or had some sort of reaction. And the only reaction we saw was him throwing up. But I think that the One Wish Willow had played onto the cat dying because, Bear was in a vulnerable state. And we can see that because Nikki is the one that says, I'm the one that lost my cat. In the beginning scene, she's like, oh, I lost my cat. So that can honestly be, of her trying to empathize, with Bear. But obviously it's not working because it's not Nikki. So I think, Bear has obviously a connection with Sandy because we saw how he reacted when Sandy passed away. We saw how distraught and how like just these guttural cries and screams for a cat, and his connection with Nikki was like that. Obviously he didn't love Nikki the same way he loved his cat, but, he would do whatever it takes to keep her loved. And we can see that, he wasn't trying to steer Nikki away. He wanted to keep her there. It was like, telling a child off. Like, instead of, having a normal reaction to her duct taping the door shut, like, you can't do that. You don't say that. You can't be like, oh, no, you can't do that, Nikki. That's not good. That's not good. It's the same way you would tell off a cat. Like, no, that's bad. Don't eat that food. Or don't knock that off.
Right.
I feel like both of them were changed.
Yeah, another thing I was thinking about too was maybe it wasn't Sandy, but one thing I did notice on the back of a One Wish Willow box, the brand that made and owns One Wish Willow is called Tabby Cat. Mm-hmm. And one thing that I noticed from a lot of movies that pertain to wishes is that they either don't allow wishes that revolve making someone love you, or it's a bad wish. Mm-hmm. And so that could be a reason why, is because it's like, the only thing that loves you more than anything in the entire world is a pet. So the reason why she had cat-like, behaviors was because they put it as if it was his cat, because that is the closest pet that he had, and the company was owned by a brand called Tabby Cat. So I think it could be that too, but it really is just ambiguous. So
I agree, and that's the point. Joe's about to blow us up. Go ahead.
I keep laughing because of what it's like is like I'm at a spelling bee contest. And I'm saying people go before me to try to spell a word, and I know they're spelling the word wrong, and I know how to spell the word. That's what it feels like right now. So basically, to Alan's point, when I did watch a session, guess what my TikTok is filled with? All obsession videos. For some reason, do they be listening? But Curry did debunk that. It's not the cat. So all the theories that you're saying I have heard of, but he did debunk it. It is not the cat. It's actually a supernatural being. Now, if you look at the girl that he was talking to in the beginning, notice when he went back, it was the dude. And do you remember he said he used the wish already? Mm-hmm. So there's theories of that's actually the girl, that's the guy now.
Yeah, we've heard that one. There's a trans flag behind him, trans love. Always.
Right. And so then the guy Curry's actually gonna do some more sequels to this, which is the Wish and Willow, because you can do a bunch of different stories. But he's also going to do another project before that one, where it's about two dudes that are trying to that use ghosts as a means to make money, and actually ran into an actual ghost. And so it's the same universe as Obsession. So you could make the argument that it's the same entity right? Because if you look at the whole thing when it started, why did he go to the shop? Because Nikki was missing her necklace, right? She went down the drain, right? You could say it's a protective stone, right? And so when she gave the gift to Bear, what was it? The tiger's, right? And before he even went in, at the end of the scene about them, what did he do? He put it on the shelf. So that could be the thing that was protecting Nikki and Bear, and now the evil spirit just took it over. You could make an argument of that. And if it's the same universe as the other movie he's making.
And I guess that's why it's ambiguous for everybody, because, yeah, I don't know. I do have one question, and then we're going to do some final thoughts. Okay. So, we've all seen different movies. We all haven't seen the same movies. I'm wondering, of all the movies you've seen this year, okay, for me, Skeletor was an awesome villain, but Bear and what's his buddy's name? Ian? Trash.
Yeah.
Okay. Are Ian and or Bear the best villains of 2026?
I think that's very hard to say because the villains are very different depending on a genre. With this, it's hard to put it like compared to, the villain in Mandalorian Grogu or Skeletor, because those guys are like super villains. Like they have a motive and they are trying to either take control of something, end something, regardless of that. Anything like in that sort of, category. Whereas Bear was like, number one, he wasn't aware of what would happen, but when it did happen, he didn't have the courage. So it really just depends on, the person. Personally, I would say he's up there with a very good villain, but I don't know how to place him, just simply because it's like, it wasn't like he did it out of bad intentions. He simply did not know it would come to this. So I think it's a very different type of villain. But I'd say him and Skeletor are neck and neck, along with the villain of the Hutts from the Mandalorian and Grogu. Those were really good villains too. So it's just kind of hard to say, because it's just a different type of villain compared to most movie villains.
Cool. What say you, Jordan?
I would actually, I would actually have to disagree on that. Now, I haven't seen Mandalorian and Grogu or Masters of the Universe, but I can say that, Bear is a really good villain. Like, if you look at any villain, from any comic, right, they've always had a motive, and they've always have had some sort of selfish intent. Now, like Elijah said, taking away someone's, humanity and taking somebody's personality is a very, horrible thing to do. For his own selfish gain. He had changed this woman's entire personality, ruined her life, because mind you, she killed 3 people to everyone else's eyes, because nobody else is, knows about the One Witch Willow in that universe. So he ruined her life, gave her, the max amount of prison sentencing, just because he wanted her to love him. So I think he was one of the best villains I've seen this year so far.
So, just jumping off of what Joe was saying, in that movie that they're currently working on, they do make a reference to her unaliving those 3 people.
Mm-hmm.
So there will be consequences because the universe ties together. So it's interesting, getting back to what Joe said, like, it didn't go away. Yeah, her life is ruined, in one way or another. Joe, Alfonso, what do you guys think villain-wise? Where does Bear fall?
Dude, wait, the worst villain this year so far is that guy who shot Crypto Man. He shot the dog. That's messed up. No, I'm just kidding.
My villain's gonna be Dr. Doom, bro. Just in that few seconds where he's blocking stuff like Goku, bro. I'm like, dude, he's gonna be the best. If we're talking about the movie, I think the ultimate villain that started everything off is you always have to have a root cause, right? And if you look at the movie, what's the root cause? The root cause is Ian, right? Ian. I mean, if you look at Bear, he was created from Ian, right? Because if you look at from the standpoint of him saying this is what he's telling us from the way he should say, even the waitress is like, yeah, you should probably say that. What did he do? Ian came down, so you should have said it. You should call freaking Nikki. That's just a hater, bro. That's a hater. So one, the moral of the whole story that I got her from is not so much the ghost and them being obsessed about it. It's about Ian being Manifesto. Let's bring it back to the X-Men. Manifesto behind the scenes, stringing everything along. Because if Ian doesn't do what he did in the beginning of the movie, Bear being a simp doesn't go down that way. Because I've never experienced being a simp. So like I can't speak on being a simp. So when you finally get something what you want and you don't want to lose it, because if you do it the right way, you feel that you might lose it. And I have never been a hater where I would do something dirty to my best friend. So I cannot relate to any of those two because I've never done that. But the ultimate villain of the movie that starts everything off is Ian. Does Bear become a villain later on because of the means of that? Of course, you could make an argument for that. But it all starts with Ian.
So we are actually rounding the end of the episode. So I'm going to give you my final thoughts. Leave the final thoughts open to Elijah and Jordan at the end here. My final thoughts are, let's see here. 3 of the people on this podcast are way too old to have watched this movie on their own. And had it not been for the encouragement of Elijah, I would have just passed it by as one of them damn Gen Z movies. But it's a really good movie, really enjoyable. I highly recommend it. I would actually watch it again if I were forced to on someone's birthday. But yeah, I definitely highly recommend it. I'll turn it over to you, Alfonso.
Yeah, like I said, I feel like the whole horror genre is being reinvented, and this is one of the movies that I would recommend in that whole group of movies that I'd recommend as a new fangled way of, them down our kids watching him. So
Nice. Joe.
get off my lawn.
I mean, I guess you could watch it one time for free on Peacock.
Elijah and Jordan, the final thoughts are yours. Tell us your final thoughts on this movie.
Honestly, final thoughts. I would highly recommend watching this movie. It's one of those movies where it leaves, like Alan said, it leaves you questioning it, right? And that's what we love in movies is if you can sit down and have a sit down conversation about the movie, well after it came out. I honestly think that makes a great movie. I'm a sucker for great cinematography. The score was amazing. The actors were perfect. Everything was just, perfect.
Yeah, to Jordan's point, I think what makes a movie really good is if it makes you leave the theater still thinking about it. And I think that's what made me want to see it more than once, is because it was like a point where I just couldn't stop thinking about it. And I think that's what makes a really good movie. I believe this movie is genuinely probably going to win some awards at any number of award shows for movies that they're going to have, whether it's a nomination or them actually winning it, just simply because of the cinematography, the way it came out on limited resources, because I know some people on that movie worked for free, and just because I'm a big sucker for cinematography as well, and the fact that they used practical effects, no special effects were added besides reverse effects or video effects. And like even scenes in cars were not actually filmed on real streets, they were used on screens. So I think generally it's a very good movie. I'm a big sucker for movies that are psychological rather than relying on jump scares, so that could be another thing about it too. But yeah, I'd say overall it's a really good movie. Acting is amazing. I believe the story has some holes in it, but aren't too bad to where they are annoying or you constantly think about them. But overall, I just think it's a really good movie, and I can't wait to see more projects by Curry Barker. And because I know he said he's going to be making a show where he tie in other small directors about different wishes. So I'm just excited to see more projects by him.
And if I could add one more last thought, it'll be really quick. I also do really appreciate the fact that they had tapped in real life elements to the movie. So in the movie, Nikki had her Instagram, and the Instagram that we saw Bear scrolling was a real Instagram. Now, obviously, it got terminated because people were putting weird stuff in her comments. But, just that in it of itself, and people actually, there's fan pages on Instagram of her, taking pictures with Bear and just really creepy, just stuff. And I think that's really amazing when movies break the fourth wall. And it wasn't even for advertising because the Instagram hadn't got, the Instagram that was shown in the movie, you know, people didn't know about it until they saw it and looked it up. And the fact that it was real and that Curry Barker had thought of it, you know, beforehand it was just something I could really appreciate.
Awesome. Well, I want to thank both of you guys. Like I said, you guys are on vacation out there. Left me at home, but that's okay. Out there in Arizona, I really appreciate you guys taking time out of your vacation to educate the three of us and educate the audience. So, thank you guys both very much.
Of course,
Thank you for having us.
And this concludes this episode of the Nerd World Order broadcast. So until next time, ladies, gentlemen, Knights of the Nerd World Order, and freaky Nickies of the world, I am NWO.
We are NWO.
Nikki redefined.
Booyah.
Booyah.
Worst booyah ever.
Worst